lot of kids have imaginary friends. Although it might seem a bit creepy at times, it's usually a short-term thing and harmless. But sometimes there are cases in which imaginary friends prove to be something else altogether. In this video, we will look at a strange and at times downright harrowing instance of this. 3-year-old Madison was just a normal girl with a normal family living in Georgia in the United States. She did ordinary little girl things like playing with dolls and blocks. And although she was quite shy, she did seem to get along with other people just fine. There was no reason to think there was anything particularly unusual about her. But one day this would all change. She started telling her mother Kelly that a friend had started coming to play with her. She told her mother that a new friend was named Kellum, and that he was a shadowy tall man, perhaps in his 40s, who would come into her room and talk with her. When she was an adult and spoke about it, she said she didn't remember seeing him for the first time. All she could remember is him just being there. She remembered one time they were both sitting round a little table she had in her room. She made Play-Doh sandwiches for him and her, or she would build block towers and knock them down because it made him laugh. She remembered him being tall. He felt like a father figure to her. He had a beard, but wasn't that old. He was maybe in his 40s. He was always wearing work clothes. At first hearing that her daughter had a new male middle-aged friend deeply alarmed Kelly, and she thought perhaps this was a molester or trespasser sneaking into her house to play with her daughter. But she could find no sign of Kellum, and nobody in the neighbourhood had seen anyone like that or anyone entering their house. Then one day Madison said that Kellum was there in the room with them. When her mother asked where, Madison just pointed to an empty corner. It was then that Kelly realised Kellum was not a real man, but rather an imaginary friend like many kids had. It was not really any the less creepy, because Kellum was some bearded, middle-aged man, and not what one would normally think a 3-year-old would conjure up for her imaginary playmate. But Kelly was nevertheless put at ease that there wasn't some flesh and blood creep lurking round the house. Kelly decided to just let it be at the time, confident that it was doing no harm and her little girl would grow out of it. But things would only get stranger from there. It all started when Madison began singing an old-fashioned sounding song that Kelly had never heard before. Kelly asked Madison what the song was called, but she didn't know. Kelly then asked where she had learned it, and Madison said that Kellum had taught her the song. Kelly said, "I had never heard the song before. It apparently dates back to the turn of the century, and one day she just started to sing it, and she was so little that I couldn't make out a melody to it. It was just words. She would sing it and I'd try to catch what she was saying, but she really couldn't talk all that well. She was barely 3 years old. We had a babysitter for Madison, and I asked the sitter one day if she could give me the words to the song. Is it on CD? Or how is she hearing it, so that I can help her sing it, and we can sing it together? The sitter said, no, I thought you had taught her that song. I don't know what she's saying either. Later that night I said, Maddie, where are you hearing that song? She said, oh, Kellum taught it to me. He sings it to his baby. It's called Daisy Bell. I found it years and years later when a co-worker told me about it. It was definitely eerie that Madison was singing a song that her mother had never heard or taught her, and which she claimed was taught to her by her imaginary friend, who sang it to his imaginary baby. Although Madison rarely played with Kellum in front of anyone, she was spending more time in her room with him. And when Kelly decided to listen in one day, it was quite creepy. She said, I still had her baby monitor and decided I would get it out and put it in her room, just so I could hear when she got out of bed and I could make sure she went back to bed. I could hear her having a conversation, and it was a definite two-way conversation. She would speak for a while, then be quiet, and then speak again. She would answer somebody. Somebody was talking to her, but I could only hear one voice. Occasionally, She would hear things tip over or loud knocks and bangs, and Madison would tell Kellum to stop it, which made it all the more creepy. Kelly was now starting to think that something stranger was going on, and it made her think of some paranormal experiences that she herself had as a child that were quite similar. She remembered as a child having a presence come into her room at night and make strange noises or shuffle about. She had to keep her light on every night until one day the bulb shattered. She said, "My mother took the lampshade off to change the bulb, but didn't put it back on, and that's when I started to notice the tapping. I could hear something tap on the light bulb at night in my room, just tap, 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 over and over again. And then there was the TV, one of the old school ones that had a button you had to pull out to turn on. The TV would literally turn on in the middle of the night. The power button would be pulled out. Nothing was showing on it except static. When I got older, I watched the film Poltergeist, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what my TV was like." I tried to explain it to my mum, but she kept dismissing it and said I was sleepwalking and to stop making up such stories because I was scaring my cousins and nobody is going to want to play with me anymore. After thinking about this, Kelly decided to keep a close eye on her daughter and her imaginary friend, thinking things were perhaps even stranger than they already seemed. As the days went on, Madison's general demeanour began to change. She seemed to be annoyed or angry all the time and started throwing regular temper tantrums, something she had never done before and which were really out of character for her. Kelly said, "I started to notice that she was really irritable all day, and I finally asked her one day, 'What's the matter? What's wrong?' And she said Kellum was keeping her up all night and she wanted to sleep." Madison explained that Kellum, who had up until then been mostly kind and comforting, had gradually become more meaner and more demanding. According to her, he never wanted her to go to bed and that he always wanted to talk at all hours. It's as if he was afraid of being alone, and when she did go to sleep, she said that he would push her, throw things, or tap on her window to wake her up. She said his face had changed and that he looked meaner and thinner, like a skeleton. Madison became more and more afraid of Kellum. Then one night it all came to a head when Kelly woke up to hear her daughter screaming in terror. She said, "I heard her screaming, and not like a bad dream scream, or I need you to come here scream. This was a terrified scream. I jumped up and opened my bedroom door. Madison was hanging over the baby gate, trying to get over it as fast as she could, screaming, 'Mummy, help me! Mummy, come help me!' I ran to pick her up. She was just inconsolable, screaming over and over, 'I'm scared.' I looked into her room and the curtains were blowing. And when I say blowing, I don't mean like a gentle breeze kind of blow. They were blowing as if the window was open and a big gust of wind was coming in through the window. But the window wasn't open. She was scared. I was scared. This was wrong. We needed to get out of there, so I grabbed her. I'm in my pyjamas with bare feet. She is in a nightgown, but we still had to leave the house. It was freezing cold outside and we had no coats. We had no shoes. It was just so scary." Madison said that Kellum had gotten really upset with her and attacked her. He had grabbed her wrist and pulled her hair. Kelly decided that they could not go back to the house that night. She made arrangements to go to her best friend's house, but she was not sure what to do from there. At the time, they had lived in a very religious area in the Bible Belt of the American South, and she was worried people might stigmatize them if they were to admit that there was something paranormal going on at their house. But in the end, she had no choice but to reach out for help. She explained what happened next. "My father-in-law at the time was a pastor of the church. This goes back to me not really wanting to say very much because I was a member of the Pentecostal church where he was based. He didn't agree with any of that kind of stuff. They preached against it at church. It was just one of those things. So I finally just broke down and called him, and I said, I don't know what to do. I need your help. He told me he was on his way to my house and not to go back there myself until I had heard from him. So it was maybe 2 hours later when he called me and said, you can go home now. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's been taken care of. But we need to talk tomorrow. I thought I was in trouble and he was going to read me the riot act. But when I got home, I see a cross made with oil over my front door. When I went inside, he had made oil crosses over the windows, the walls, bathroom mirrors. In fact, all through the house there were these oil crosses, which unnerved me a bit, but it almost felt peaceful. It felt the way it had always felt before Kellum showed up. We never had another issue with Kellum after that. Convinced that they had been dealing with a spirit, Kelly was curious about who Kellum was and where he had come from, and began doing some research into the area to see if she could come up with some answers to her many questions. She looked through the site Ancestry.com, and what she found was chilling. She said, I thought you could only look at family names on Ancestry, but you can actually do property searches as well. And we put in my property and also put in the properties around us, probably within a good half-mile of our home. What we found out was that the property that was next to ours in 1941 was bought by the Beasley family, and the thing that made my blood run cold was when we pulled up the property history, we found out that the man who bought it was named Callum. I just got chills all over. His name was Callum Beasley. It sounded a lot like Kellum, probably more so to a 3-year-old. I thought it was an odd name, so when I saw the actual name come up on the search for the property, I swear I felt every bit of blood drain out of my face. But there was something even more chilling about Callum Beasley. He had 5 children. The youngest was named Madison. She died when she was 3 years old, the same age as Madison was when Kellum showed up. And it almost makes me wonder, was this his way of connecting to something? Did he think this was his child? There was just too much of a coincidence for us not to sit up and take notice. Kelly then went about trying to contact any surviving relatives of Callum Beasley to find out more, but none of them were willing to talk to her about it. She would finally get fed up and just try to put it all behind her. She said, I did reach out to one of the women in the family. At the time, she was a little older than I was, and she just seemed really hesitant about wanting to give me any information. I tried to explain to her about my daughter and her imaginary friend, and he seemed to be the same age as her uncle was. I said I understood he might have had a daughter, and she was like, "You are crazy. You are making up these stories." It made me feel almost ashamed of even asking questions. So in the end, I thought, if no one wants to talk about it or acknowledge it, then I will just forget about it and go about my daily business. It's hard to know what to make of all this. Was there really anything paranormal happening here? There is no real physical evidence, but it certainly seems very eerie. There is no way to know what was really going on, but the details of the events certainly seemed like nothing a 3-year-old would make up. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.